Ah, they didn't expect this turn. They didn't expect the shift. They didn't expect people to finally see through the act, the performance, the fabricated narratives built behind the scenes. For so long, they relied on exaggerations, accusations, whispers thrown into the air like bait. They assumed everyone would swallow the version of events they manufactured. They thought your image was something they could sculpt according to their convenience. But something unexpected happened, something they never calculated. People started paying attention, not to them, not to their stories, but to you, to the way you move, to the way you speak, to the way you carry yourself under pressure, to the way you respond without flinching. And that observation alone began creating ripples that terrified the ones who tried to distort your name. Because for the first time, people aren't just watching. They're speaking, they're comparing, they're connecting dots. They're defending you without you asking. They're correcting the narrative for you. And that is something your opponents never prepared for. They assumed that once they twisted the storyline, it would stay twisted. They assumed that once they claimed something, others would never question it. But people started noticing inconsistencies. They noticed the desperation behind the accusations. They noticed how the loudest critics were the ones with the weakest credibility. They noticed how every claim against you fell apart when looked at closely. And the more they examined, the more the truth started becoming unavoidable. People are recognizing the pattern. They're seeing how calm you've been, even when you had every reason to retaliate. They're seeing how steady you've stayed, even when the environment around you was built to provoke a reaction. They're seeing how grounded you are, even when lies were crafted to push you off balance. That contrast alone has done more for your reputation than any self-defense statement ever could. Your composure became your strongest argument. Your consistency became your shield. And your patience became the proof people needed to understand who was honest and who wasn't. You didn't force anyone to side with you. You didn't recruit supporters. You didn't beg for validation. You simply lived your truth while others tried to distort it. And that truth has now started speaking louder than any accusation ever could. People have begun defending you because they finally understand something that took time to reveal itself. The ones who attacked you never had evidence. They only had bitterness, fear, and a desire to drag you down before you could rise. People now realize the difference between someone with genuine intentions and someone who acts out of insecurity. And that realization is reshaping the entire narrative. The irony is powerful. The same individuals who tried to create a negative image of you are the ones now struggling to hold their own credibility together. Because every defense made in your favor exposes them a little more. Every voice rising for you weakens their influence. Every person standing by your side becomes a spotlight on their dishonesty. And they feel it. They feel the losing battle. They feel the momentum shift. They feel their fabricated foundation cracking. They feel the pressure of accountability approaching. And nothing terrifies a liar more than a collective awakening. You are becoming the person people want to rally behind. Not because you asked for support, but because your integrity forced people to pay attention. People are realizing that you didn't shrink, you didn't retaliate impulsively, you didn't degrade yourself trying to fight rumors. You outclassed the entire situation simply by being who you truly are. And that is what created this shift. Your opponents underestimated how powerful authenticity becomes when placed next to manipulation. They thought their noise would overshadow your truth. Instead, your truth muted their noise. People are saying things like, "Hold on, that doesn't add up." Why would they say that about someone who's been consistent for so long? Wait a second. Look at how calm they are compared to how erratic the accusers are. These observations matter. They matter because they indicate something deeper. People are forming their own conclusions based on logic, not gossip. Based on behavior, not rumors. Based on energy, not exaggerations. People trust what they can feel, and the energy you project is grounded, stable, sincere. The energy your opponents project is reactive, chaotic, forced, and everyone senses the difference. This is the moment that changes everything. This is the moment where people stop absorbing lies and start analyzing motives. This is the moment where the weak attempts to smear your character become the very reason people start admiring your strength. Because people aren't blind. They may be slow to catch on sometimes, but they are never permanently fooled. They observe patterns. They evaluate behavior. They see who speaks from clarity and who speaks from insecurity. And the contrast between you and your critics has become impossible to ignore. You know what's even more interesting? People are defending you, even when you're silent, even when you haven't said a word in your own favor, even when you've chosen distance over conflict. That alone has shifted the entire conversation. Because when someone is guilty, they fight desperately. They rush to clear their name. They scramble to make explanations. They overreact to every small comment. You didn't do any of that. You stayed composed. And now people are interpreting that composure correctly. They see it as confidence in your truth. They see it as strength. They see it as emotional control. They see it as the behavior of someone who doesn't need to prove anything. Your enemies, however, are exhibiting the opposite. They can't stop talking. They can't stop trying to justify themselves. They can't stop repeating the same claims in hopes that someone out there will still buy into it. But the more they speak, the more obvious their insecurity becomes. Their words expose them. Their tone exposes them. Their inconsistencies expose them. And because of that, people are no longer just doubting them. They're actively defending you against them. And the best part is, your role in this shift is incredibly simple. You didn't fight for a narrative. You didn't wrestle for public opinion. You didn't argue for validation. You simply allowed people to see the truth through your behavior. That's the type of influence that can't be faked. It can't be bought. It can't be manipulated. It can only be earned. And you earned it by staying aligned with who you are even while you were being misjudged. People are defending you because your strength taught them something. It taught them that the calmest person in the room is usually the one telling the truth. It taught them that false accusations crumble when the accused refuses to panic. It taught them that integrity always reveals itself, even if it takes time. And it taught them that your opponents were more invested in tearing you down than in living their own lives with honesty. Now the ones who once whispered against you are whispering in your support. The same people who doubted you are now saying, "Wait, maybe we judged too quickly." The same individuals who once believed lies are now analyzing every detail and realizing they were fed narratives based on jealousy and insecurity. And that's what has ignited this movement of people defending you. Because when the truth becomes clear, people naturally gravitate toward the one who was wronged. It's fascinating how tables turn. You didn't flip them. Reality flipped them for you. Your opponents handed themselves over to accountability without even realizing it. They tried to create distance between you and the world. But in doing so, they highlighted your character for the world to witness. They tried to highlight your flaws, but all they highlighted was their own desperation. They tried to ruin your reputation, but they strengthened it by revealing how threatened they were by you. And now you're stepping into an unexpected advantage. People aren't just seeing your truth, they're protecting it. They're guarding your name. They're shutting down false claims before they spread. They're correcting misinformation immediately. They're calling out inconsistencies. They're exposing lies as soon as they appear. Your supporters aren't passive, they're active, they're alert, they're aware. And their awareness is growing by the day. The people defending you don't just believe you. They align with you energetically. They resonate with your calm. They appreciate your restraint. They respect your dignity. They admire how you carried yourself through something designed to weaken you. And that admiration is creating something powerful around you. An invisible shield. A shield of clarity. A shield of recognition. A shield built not from words, but from the impression you've left on people's minds. You are no longer someone they simply observe. You are someone they stand beside. And this is only the beginning of what happens when truth starts surfacing from all directions. You don't need to force the next stage. You don't need to convince anyone. You don't need to do anything drastic. The momentum is already shifting for you. The path is already clearing ahead of you. And as this shift continues, something even stronger begins forming behind the scenes. Something that takes this situation into its next evolution, where people not only defend you, but begin to actively correct the rewritten narrative, piece by piece, exposing what was hidden, questioning what was accepted, and challenging what was blindly believed. Because now, something different is happening, something your opponents never saw coming. People aren't just defending you casually. They're doing it with conviction. They're doing it with evidence. They're doing it with deliberate intention. They're bringing up timelines. They're pointing out inconsistencies. They're showing how every claim against you was rooted in exaggeration, insecurity, or personal grievance. They're identifying patterns in the behavior of those who attacked you. And this isn't random support. This is collective recognition. It's the kind of recognition that forms naturally when the truth becomes too loud to ignore. People are revisiting past events with fresh eyes. They're rereading messages. They're recalling conversations. They're remembering moments that didn't make sense before, but now fit perfectly into the puzzle. Suddenly, the version of events that once seemed believable begins to crumble. The false narrative collapses under the pressure of collective reasoning. People are realizing that the ones who tried to frame you as the problem were projecting their own issues onto you. They're realizing they were manipulated into seeing you through someone else's fear. And that realization is powerful enough to shift the entire balance of this situation. There's a specific moment in every conflict where perception flips, where the mask slips, where the audience stops questioning the innocent and starts questioning the accuser. You are entering that moment now. People are watching the reactions of those who attacked you, and something feels off to them. They're noticing the emotional instability behind their words. They're noticing the defensive over-explanations. They're noticing how every time someone speaks in your defense, the critics respond with agitation instead of clarity. And that agitation alone tells people everything they need to know. When someone is guilty, they fear exposure. When someone is wrong, they fear accountability. When someone builds their identity on tearing another person down, any challenge to their narrative feels like a threat. And that is exactly what is happening now. The people who once felt confident speaking against you are suddenly scrambling. They can feel the collective shift in the atmosphere. They can sense that they're losing control of the story they built. And nothing terrifies them more than the idea of being seen without their mask. Meanwhile, you, without saying a word, are gaining support from every angle. And this support isn't shallow, it's rooted. People defending you now have reasons. They have observations. They have clarity. They have evidence. They have their own experiences that align with your truth. This isn't about favoritism. This isn't about picking sides blindly. This is about logical recognition, emotional recognition, social recognition. People who once stayed neutral are stepping forward, not because you asked, but because they feel compelled to protect accuracy. They feel compelled to correct distortions. They feel compelled to stand with the person who carried themselves with dignity instead of desperation. This is what authenticity does. It attracts alignment without effort. It earns loyalty without asking. It builds protection without manipulation. Your integrity has become a magnet, pulling the right voices closer, while exposing the ones who operate through deception. And the more people speak in your favor, the more the truth spreads through conversations you'll never witness. Group discussions, private chats, quiet observations. Your name is being spoken with respect that in places you don't even know. That's the type of influence only truth can create. And when people talk, they talk with detail. They bring up how you handled things. They mention your restraint. They talk about moments when you could have retaliated, but chose not to. They talk about how your behavior stayed consistent even under pressure. They talk about how the ones accusing you couldn't maintain that same consistency. They mention the body language, the tones, the timing. They talk about how whenever anyone questioned the attackers, the story kept shifting. They talk about how every time you were confronted, your story stayed the same. That consistency is becoming the anchor in every conversation about you. Your calm became undeniable evidence. Your stability became the standard people use to measure the credibility of everyone involved. And the contrast is striking, because the ones who tried to twist your image relied on emotional outbursts, exaggerated stories, and dramatic claims. But now people are realizing something important. When someone is telling the truth, their story doesn't need theatrics. When someone is lying, they rely on volume and dramatization to keep the audience engaged. And people are seeing through that now. There's something else happening too, something even more interesting. People who never knew you personally, people who only heard bits and pieces of the situation from a distance, are now speaking in your defense. They're saying things like, "I don't even know this person, but everything being said about them feels exaggerated. Something doesn't add up. Why are the critics more emotional than the person they're accusing? Why does the accused seem more grounded than the ones doing the blaming?" These questions carry weight. They carry influence. They create doubt around the false narrative. And once doubt enters the conversation, lies lose their power. You know why people are defending you? Because your energy never aligned with the accusations. Even people who don't know you personally can feel that. They can sense the disconnect. They can sense the desperation behind the attempts to discredit you. They can sense the internal chaos of the ones spreading negativity. But your presence communicates something entirely different, something they can trust, something they can lean on, something they can interpret as genuine without needing explanation. It isn't just about what you said. It's about how you carried yourself. It's about how you moved. It's about how you didn't break character when pressured. People trust patterns more than they trust claims. And your pattern has been consistent from the start. Dignity, control, confidence, stability. You didn't need to attack anyone to prove your point. You didn't need to lower your standards. You didn't need to expose anyone. You simply stood firm in who you are, and now people are aligning with you because your actions speak louder than the accusations ever could. And as more people defend you, something bigger is happening. Your critics are losing their audience. Their voice isn't spreading anymore. Their influence isn't landing the same way. Their attempts to revive the narrative feel forced and transparent. People are uninterested. They're tired. They're done listening to exaggerated claims. When people defend you, they aren't just supporting you. They're rejecting the ones who tried to mislead them. And that rejection feels like a collapse of credibility, a collapse of control, a collapse of the illusion they worked so hard to maintain. The shift in public perception is happening quietly, but it's happening powerfully. Conversations are changing. Tone is changing. People who once sided with your opponents out of convenience are switching sides now because they finally feel safe enough to acknowledge the truth. They don't fear backlash anymore. They don't fear being targeted for defending you. The collective support is strong enough to overshadow any pushback, and that makes it easier for more voices to join in. Now the majority is leaning toward your truth, and that majority is loud enough to drown out the last fragments of the manufactured narrative. Your critics are panicking because they can sense they're losing grip. Every new defense made in your favor feels like another blow to the version of events they tried to sell. Every person who speaks up for you makes them feel exposed. Every quiet observer who suddenly questions them feels like another step toward accountability. And accountability is the last thing they want. But here's the part they never prepared for. The conversations aren't happening in front of them. They're happening behind their backs, in places they can't control, among people they never imagined would question them. And once people form their own conclusions, there's nothing your critics can do to reverse it. The narrative has shifted. The perception has evolved. The truth has taken center stage without needing permission. And amid all of this, your image is transforming. You're no longer seen as the target. You're seen as the survivor. You're seen as the grounded one. You're seen as the person who handled something unfair, with more strength than the people who created it. That transformation is powerful because it elevates your position in ways no defense statement ever could. When people defend you, they give you power. When people correct lies about you, they give you validation without you seeking it. When people stand beside you, they build a foundation that cannot be broken. This is the new momentum you're stepping into, the phase where truth gains speed, the phase where the narrative reconstructs itself, the phase where the real story begins to surface, not through your voice, but through the voices of everyone who now feels compelled to protect your name. And this momentum isn't slowing down. It's only growing stronger, because now people are not just defending you, they're preparing to take the next step. They're ready to expose inconsistencies. They're ready to dismantle the false narrative entirely. They're ready to bring forward the parts that were hidden to protect the wrong people. They're ready to question everything that was accepted without evidence. And this shift, this collective awakening, is leading directly into the next stage of this story, where the truth not only becomes clear, it becomes undeniable. This is the moment where the energy around you evolves into something sharper, something more direct, something that refuses to let lies breathe. The same individuals who once stayed quiet because they didn't want to get involved are now stepping forward because they can no longer tolerate the disconnect between what was said about you and who you truly are. Their voices are not whispers anymore. They're deliberate, confident, and pointed, as if each sentence they speak carries its own weight of accountability. People are not simply observing the truth. They're carrying it. They're delivering it. They're pushing it into every room where your name has ever been misunderstood. And the reason this shift is so strong now is because people have seen too much. They've seen the contradictions in the original accusations. They've seen the emotional instability of the ones who tried to damage you. They've seen how the story kept changing, how certain details were exaggerated, how certain moments were selectively presented to paint you negatively. They've watched the accusers fall apart under their own narrative. And now that enough time has passed, the truth has become too visible to deny. When people defend you now, it's not out of sympathy, it's out of clarity. They're not standing with you because they feel bad. They're standing with you because they've recognized who was honest and who was deceptive. They saw how you moved with consistency while others shifted their tone depending on who they were talking to. They saw how your actions remained stable while the other side kept scrambling to maintain a version of events that didn't match reality. And the more people looked closely, the more they realized that the truth was always sitting in plain view. They just needed distance from the noise to recognize it. The conversations around you now carry a different tone. People aren't just saying, "I think they're innocent." They're saying, the story they told about them was never true. They're saying, "I should have questioned it earlier." They're saying, "This makes so much more sense now." These are the kinds of statements that don't just defend you. They dismantle the accusations at their roots. They rewrite the social memory of what happened. They shift the weight of accountability onto the correct shoulders. And your opponents feel it. They feel the tightening pressure of being questioned. They feel the growing discomfort of knowing people are connecting dots they hoped would stay scattered. They feel the eyes turning toward them. They feel the responsibility creeping in. They feel the consequences they thought they could outrun starting to catch up. And the silence they once weaponized against you is now suffocating them. Because when people defend you in groups, when the collective opinion shifts, the ones who lied feel cornered, not through confrontation, but through exposure. They can sense they're losing the ability to shape perception. They can sense the narrative slipping from their hands. They can sense that their version of events is no longer being accepted as truth. And that loss of control terrifies them more than anything you could have ever done in retaliation. You see, this is the part they never expected. People weren't supposed to question them. People weren't supposed to analyze the situation deeply. People weren't supposed to look at your behavior and compare it to theirs. But they did. And that comparison destroyed everything they tried to build. Every lie they crafted now looks fragile. Every accusation they made now looks like projection. Every emotional outburst they used to manipulate perception now looks like a confession. The shift didn't happen because you argued. It didn't happen because you pleaded your case. It didn't happen because you demanded people listen. It happened because truth, when given enough time, exposes everything around it. Your consistency revealed their instability. Your calm revealed their chaos. Your honesty revealed their desperation. People saw that contrast and instinctively gravitated toward you, not because you pushed them, but because the truth pulled them. And now, something even more powerful is happening. People are starting to speak up in places where your critics cannot interfere. Group conversations, private messages, discussions behind closed doors. People are drawing their own conclusions without being influenced, and those conclusions are aligning with your side more and more each day. You have become the person they trust, not because you tried to convince them, but because your behavior earned it. This is the final stage where truth transforms into influence, where your character becomes a reference point in every discussion, where people use your composure as the standard to judge the accusers. And once people adopt that standard, the false narrative has no room left to breathe. Every exaggeration becomes obvious. Every fabricated detail becomes transparent. Every emotionally driven claim becomes suspicious. And this suspicion spreads faster than any lie ever could. People defending you is not just social support. It is social correction. It is a recalibration of reputation. It is a rebalancing of truth. And that correction is happening now with full force. People are standing up not because they must, but because they want to. Because they've seen the injustice. Because they've seen the real you. Because they've seen how unfair the situation was. And because they can no longer watch deception win. This is why the atmosphere around you feels so different. This is why the energy feels charged. This is why the conversations feel heavy. Because this isn't just defense anymore. This is rectification. It's the world correcting itself. It's the truth claiming its place. It's the moment where everything flips, where everything becomes transparent, where everything becomes undeniable. And this is where the ripple becomes a wave, where the wave becomes a force, and where the force becomes a turning point. Because once people begin stepping forward with certainty, the entire energy around your situation starts shifting in a way that no one can deny. You can feel it, even if no one says it directly. You can see it in how people adjust their posture around you, in how they hesitate before repeating old assumptions, in how they double-check details they used to echo without thinking. It's subtle at first, small pauses, restrained reactions, cautious evaluations, but then it grows. It becomes visible. T becomes consistent. It becomes accepted. People who once believed whatever narrative they were handed now question everything before letting it pass through their mind. They no longer swallow what they're fed. They analyze, they verify, they compare actions with words, results with claims, patterns with behavior. And every time they run that internal comparison, the same conclusion returns. You were done wrong, and they can no longer pretend otherwise. This is what real defense looks like. Not noise, not chaos, not confrontational energy. It's steady, grounded clarity. It's awareness turning into alignment. It's recognition turning into loyalty. People aren't defending you out of sympathy. They're defending you because the evidence is now too strong to ignore. And that makes your position powerful in a way that goes beyond words, beyond arguments, beyond any attempt that was made to distort the truth about you. What's happening now is collective realization, and collective realization is something no individual can stop. Once a group starts to understand what really happened, once they start piecing together the parts that never made sense, once they start comparing timelines and behavior and reactions, the narrative built against you collapses under its own weight. It can't sustain itself anymore. It had too many holes, too many contradictions, too many exaggerated claims, too many emotional manipulations designed to make you look like the problem when you were actually the one absorbing the damage. And the people who once stayed neutral, they're no longer neutral. They're leaning toward you because clarity pushes them there. They're leaning toward you because self-respect pushes them there. They're leaning toward you because seeing reality clearly forces them to recognize who was genuine and who was performative. And the more they lean, the more others begin to lean with them. That's how momentum builds, not through shouting matches, but through shifts in perception. And these shifts have already begun spreading. You can see it in the way people talk now. You can see it in the way they correct misinformation, even casually. You can see it in the way they annotate conversations with, "Actually, that's not what happened." Or, "I remember a completely different version." Or, "Wait, that doesn't match what we've seen." Those small corrections are not small. They're pressure points. They're disruptions in the script that was forced on everyone. And each disruption weakens the false story that was once used to isolate you. What's fascinating is how predictable this stage is. The truth always resurfaces. It just takes time for people to see what they were manipulated into ignoring. The ones who created the false narrative expected no one to question it. They counted on people being passive. They counted on people being easily influenced. They counted on people not paying attention. But people are paying attention now. And once attention shifts, protection forms on its own. It's not something you request. It's not something you push for. It's something people decide. And their decision carries far more weight than anything you could have said on your own. Because when people choose to defend someone based on their own realization, their voice becomes even stronger than the truth itself. Their voice becomes proof of the truth. And that's exactly what's happening now. Oh, people aren't just defending you. They're owning the defense. They're taking responsibility for correcting the narrative because they see the consequences of letting lies spread unchecked. They see how unfairness grows when no one challenges it. They see how manipulation spreads when it's left unaddressed. They see how easily a reputation can be distorted when the loudest voice wins by default. But now the loudest voice isn't the one that attacked you. The loudest voice is the collective, aligned, awakened group that finally sees what was really going on. And their voice speaks with unity, confidence, and first-hand understanding. And this newfound unity, it makes the people who tried to twist the story extremely uncomfortable. They can't control the narrative anymore. They can't direct the conversation. They can't use exaggeration as a weapon. They can't rely on misdirection. They can't hide behind emotional manipulation. Because now, everything they say is being evaluated through a different lens. Instead of being believed, their words are being dissected. Instead of sounding convincing, their reactions look defensive. Instead of appearing confident, they appear unstable. And that shift is what destroys the illusion they built. Once the crowd stops believing the magician Every trick falls flat. But here's the most powerful part. You didn't have to attack anyone to make this happen. You didn't have to fight for your reputation. You didn't have to beg anyone to understand. You didn't have to defend yourself loudly. Your truth defended itself. Your character did the work. Your consistency carried the weight. And now, the people who once questioned you are the ones protecting you. The people who doubted you are the ones validating you. The people who distanced themselves are now coming closer with humility, because they finally see the full picture they once overlooked. That reversal is not accidental, it's natural. When someone has integrity, the truth eventually reveals them. And when someone doesn't, the truth eventually exposes them. You're witnessing that exposure unfold in real time. But what comes next is even stronger. Not only will people defend you and correct the narrative, they'll start openly rejecting the version of events that was used to frame you. They'll start rejecting the lies. They'll start rejecting the manipulative tactics. They'll start rejecting the person who orchestrated the distortion. And that collective rejection carries more impact than anything you could have done alone. It's the final phase of this shift, where the truth becomes not just visible, but dominant. And when the truth becomes dominant, your position rises without effort. Your name clears without explanation. Your image strengthens without strategy. And the people who once tried to spin stories about you, they become irrelevant, because the truth already won. And now, people are making sure everyone knows it.